I was just standing here awkwardly so that you could feel my pain. This is quite a big auditorium, and everyone is so well dispersed that it's hard to tell whether we've got a good crowd or a small crowd. The upshot of running a lightning talk session when you have 15 speakers is that you have at least 15 people in the room, and this it makes it easy for me to fill in my feedback form. So there's a quote. It often gets misattributed to many people, including Winston Churchill and Mark Twain, but it actually comes from Blaise Pascal, who he may have been named in honour of your first programming language if you actually did computing oh so long ago. But he actually wrote a very long letter, and at the end of it he said, "I apologise for the length of this letter, but I didn't have the time to make it shorter." And what we're trying to encompass in these lightning talks is actually the people have put some effort into distilling down something useful into only 5 minutes. And when people say, "Is it really only 5 minutes?" Yes, it is. We have no cups for people to drink from because they actually don't have time to get a dry mouth. In fact, there are only 12 cups, so 3 people miss out already. You get 5 minutes, then this thing will make an awkward noise, and if you continue to stand on stage and continue talking, people won't be appreciating it. We actually only have 1 spare minute, and I'm chewing into that already. So without further ado, we'll have Joost van Dijk from SurfNet. I'll see you in 5.
Okay, hello. I'm going to talk about Mujina, which is software you can use for testing your services once you start federating them. So if you're not into federation, you better go check your email. And otherwise, I just want to talk very shortly about what it is. So actually, it's about a mock IDP and SP. So mock IDPs and SPs, they can be used in software testing. And this software has been developed when we're working on OpenConnext, and it was born out of need. But now we think it might actually be very useful for people out there building services and trying to federate them, so to connect them to a federation. And we try to promote this, and hopefully we'll have many services connected to our platform. But if you're into building applications, if you're hiring people to build applications that are going to be connected to a federation, this might be very useful. It's software built on top of OpenSAML, which is also used in Shibboleth, so it's so that's good. But the nice thing about it is that to configure it, you can use a REST API, and why this is convenient, I'll go into shortly. So why would you need it? To test your software, especially if your software is using attributes to make all kinds of authorization decisions, and it's very handy to have an easy way to set up your environment. So that's what a mock object does. It simulates an environment. It's like a crash test dummy that will help you test your software. And we build it in such a way that you can integrate it in your existing testing frameworks like Selenium or GMeter, stuff like that, to automate testing. So how are you going to do this? Well, we have a Git repository containing the software. Just get the Git repo, build the software using Maven, and run it using Jetty. So this is basically information from our README file. And what you can do is you can dynamically configure your IDP to release specific attributes that are required on your SP. So you can automate tests using, for example, curl to configure your IDP. So maybe it's useful to just give a little demo. So I've already started my IDP and SP. And let's go to my SP, which is a service running on port 9090. And here you can see I can log in. Out of the box, it has a default user called user and a default password called secret, or named secret. So here I logged in. Here you see some default attributes being released. Well, probably not the attributes you're going to need, but if you need some specific attributes, you can use the REST API to set it up. So let's do a little demo there. I just created a make file to test this, and let's say I want to add an attribute for a given user. So this is basically what happens. I use curl, and I'm just telling it to define an attribute called URN-MageDir attribute.foo, and has a value of bar. So by executing this script, I add an attribute. So let's try that out. If I now open my browser again, and I go to my SP on port 9090, get redirected to my IDP, log in as user, and the secret. And now I should have an attribute foo. Well, suppose this attribute foo is being used to make an authorization decision. I can just fire up my Selenium or whatever I use for testing and check that result is as expected. So a deny or an accept, whatever the purpose of this attribute is. We've been using it very successfully to do integration testing at SurfNet, and hopefully you'll find it of value. So please use it, and of course we welcome feedback if you have any suggestions or maybe contributions. That's about it. Thanks.
"15 seconds. That's great. I can never make a point in such a short amount of time, so I'll waste the remaining time until Guido Arben. Oh, this is the noise. So Guido Arben from ARNet.
From ARNet, but in my capacity of one of the members of the file center team. I've only got the 4 minutes and a couple of seconds, so I'm not going to waste too much time explaining what file center is. I'm going to just blithely assume that you kind of largely know that it exists. In one sentence, it's sort of you send it on steroids, except our surname isn't .com, and we don't own any yachts. It's actually faster than most of these web transfer tools. It does over 2 gig. Here I'm doing an introduction anyway. It's federated, it's domesticated, and we love it as a service. Quite a few NRENs have installed an installation of file sender by now. The top list is just the core team of NRENs, but there's many others out there who have actually helped us out a great deal. I wish I had room for all the logos. I'm considering using a moving GIF. The graph you see is the adoption curve within ARNet. So as you can see, it's sort of accruing almost linearly. At a particular point in time, I almost thought it was going exponential, but that was just a pipe dream. But it's a lot of users. It's more users than we're kind of used to on a regular service. You guys might be more excellent than we are, but most services that we roll out are for the happy few. Light paths, high performance computing, that sort of stuff. You're in the hundreds of users at most, and never this sort of outreach. And certainly not this particular user profile. You can't see it here, but most of these users are regular users. You know what I mean, right? Not us. And while it works well as a simple tool to transfer files, when you've got this sort of a large constituency that you can deal with, that you can talk to, after a while, the old NREN blood starts to boil, and you kind of want to help them to a better lifestyle. So that's why the last little line. We've got some room in the way that file sender is set up. We've got a main. It's actually quite standard, so most of you would be aware of how you run these sorts of SVN or Git type trunks. We've got the playground in there. And so we could do slightly disruptive coding to test out ideas without hindering the main trunk, the main build and the main trunks. The two of these projects, there's quite a few of these projects on the way, and the last slide will be about that. And there'll actually be a file sender birds of a feather session tomorrow late afternoon. So do come to that if I've given you enough of a cliffhanger. But there's 2 projects right now that have to do with trying to re-inject notions about security, about cryptography that we've never been able to sort of distribute to users in previous frameworks. Maybe you guys have dealt with PGP MIME, secure email, secure HTTP, that sort of stuff, trying to get your user to use certificates. It's always painful. And even though it is the way they ought to use the networks, it's not what they do. They don't mind plain text. Well, if they do mind, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to work around it and make things secure. So they kind of cop it on the chin and just do it anyway. So this is why we thought, dear Lord, that's fast. This is why we thought that we'd inject two projects to try and help them to a better lifestyle. One is end-to-end cryptography without installation, so you don't need a client to actually do the end-to-end cryptography. And the central server that you run at the NREN never sees the actual unencrypted data, which is good for legal reasons as well. And the second one is to try and get cryptographic timestamping in there, because you'll notice that when you look at the logs, you'll notice that some users are actually sending their full research data set, particularly geneticists do this. You get 10 to sort of sometimes 50 gigabytes of full genomic runs, and that's actually their research data. If they lose it, or if somebody else claims precedence on the data, they've lost that paper there and then. So to be able to help them to a sense of provenance, a notion of I owned this first, would be great, we think. We've sounded this out with a couple of people, but it's just too complex for them to think about. You've got to dangle it in front of them, we think. So where are we at the moment? This is the status of yesterday. For both projects, we're in the phases where we've got either prototypes or half-working code. It's promising. If you're interested in these things, if you believe that this has merit in your own NREN, say for sharing medical data, patient-related data, end-to-end encryption would be great, we think. So do join the effort. Do tell us if you've got experience in these sorts of things. We're quite proud about the fact that we're really able to do particularly the end-to-end crypto because we decided our architecture from the get-go has been an HTML5 architecture. So we can use file slices and file blobs. So we can look at a file, even if it's 50 gigs, we can look at small enough items in the file that we can do inline crypto. Bloody hell, Brooke. That we can do inline crypto. Shut up. Shut all of you. All of you shut up. We can actually do inline crypto on the blobs because we've done HTML5. We're quite proud of that. And if you want more information, I've actually used the full 5 minutes, and now I'm actually going to tell you to look at more of our presentation at the File Center boss. This hasn't been good. Sorry, Brooke.
I'll have to sit further up so it takes longer.
That'd be nice.
I'll sit further away. Yeah.
Thanks anyway.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Questions?
Guido Arden. So usually when you're doing a presentation, you get that dry in your mouth. Yeah. And actually when your presentation is dying, it feels like it's taking forever, but it actually doesn't. It's 5 minutes long. Next up, we have Leopoldo. I'm going to go find the presentation now. Where? Lightning. Here we go. Yeah, yes. Where do I find the play button? This one here, right?
Yes. How to change the
just spacebar.
Okay.
Spacebar
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will talk about microblogging and the web in the framework of the public outreach. A very small, unlimited experience on a public lecture of astronomy, because I am an astronomer. The framework is that of the Genoa Science Festival, that with the Edinburgh one is the oldest and also the biggest, 200,000 people. What we wanted to experience is that if it is possible via Twitter to know before the conference interests, curiosities of the possible participants to the conference. So, we started with a website. The website is on the topic of the conference, and the topic is, of course, astronomy, but it's quite unusual because is the presence in our language, all the languages, of course, of the old, very old relationship between the mankind and the sky. To make an example, in Italian and English, in Italian, considerare, in English to consider, derives from Latin to be cum sidera, with the star, because in the star there is gods, the futures, and so on. It's not my opinion, but anyway, this is the language. So first, we started writing a list of keywords. Words became keywords belonging to our conference. And these became hashtag to be looked for in the Italian Twitter sphere. We looked also one by one for possible power user. We have been very, very lucky because we had one that is the man on the right top, that is Alberto Hanzela, that is a TV anchorman for science programs. So he was making a poll and using some of our keywords. We used a completely brand new Twitter user. And only 15 days, so we started from scratch in a very rough manner. We addresses with the hashtag communities or categories of users with a different hashtag and also individual users, sorry. Each tweet was short enough to allow retweet and ended with the link to one post of the website. So we used as a gross, very gross, but measurement, the number of clicks for each post. And each post, the meaning of each post was a word of our conference. So these are the numbers, 500 tweets and 125 retweets, mainly from power users. This is very important, and this is why we had more or less 1,000 visits. And visits are very different as far as different words are concerned. So we had an indication for the speaker to tune the lecture on some particular words, meaning subtopic of interest of the people that were our followers. For us, it's really positive, and we are planning to use in a broader way with other communities, and especially from September for education with more and more people. Okay, thank you very much. I finished, okay? I want to acknowledge my colleague Cristina Rigutto and the 4 students of our University of Padua that collaborate with me and Cristina for this work. So the merit is of the students. So also, if you find some faults of the student, of course. Thank you very much.
So can I improve this? Here we go.
Can you open Office? Because I don't know if the transition.
Ah, okay. Did it not open Office? No, it didn't. Okay. This one?
Yeah.
Open with. This one?
Yeah.
How do I play with this?
F5.
That one? Lorenzo, you're the choose.
Okay, hello. My name is Lorenzo, and I'm going to present this this work we do it for the CNET Federation in Mexico. And this is my company, Jaco, which is the one that this research. I'm Lorenzo here. Okay, so this whole thing is about user provisioning. And this is basically the evolution for the provisioning point of view about application domestication. So in the first place, we have while application which are not integrated with SAML2 technologies or any other federation technologies. Then we have a little bit more advanced application with that single sign-on profile. Then in the next step, we have single sign-on application that also does just-in-time provisioning of users. And then the next one, which is the one we made, is single sign-on with just-in-time provisioning, but also asynchronous provisioning. And then next step we will see soon is more or less the same, but with the use of new standards like SCIM. So let's see what basically a very rough diagram about single sign-on, where the application starts the flow with an authentication request to the IDP through the SP. Then the IDP just responds with an authentication response. And then the service provider sends the user information, the user attributes to the application, which just log in the user. But the problem here is that the user must be already provisioned in the application, which is a problem most of the time. In the next step, we have single sign-on with just-in-time provisioning, where basically the steps are the same, but when the user attributes goes to the application provisions the user in that moment, but that's because it's just in time, and then log in. But here, the problem is that it requires the user to sign in the application to be provisioned. Sometimes we want the user to be provisioned in the application before. And that's what our approach tries to handle. So here is different because the IDP starts the flow asking the application for a provision request. Then the application sends an attribute query request, which is different from the authentication request. And the identity provider collects all the information it can about the user. Then it sends back the attribute response to the service provider, and now the service provider can give all the attributes of the user to the application and then provision. And all this stuff is without the user intervention. It can be from an administrator starting the request from the IDP. So in this case, steps 2 and 4 can be implemented using front channel or back channel. But the specification of attribute query request said that you should use back channel, in this case, SOAP communication. If you want to see more details of this communication, you can see that in the first case, we are doing with a HTTP post or delete, depending if we want to provision the user or deprovision. Then the attribute query, you can do it with SOAP or HTTP redirect, but the spec said you should use SOAP. Then for collecting the attributes, there is a lot of ways of doing this. You just go to your sources and get the information. And then in the attribute query response, you put all the attributes, but that's a typical attribute query response. And the user info sending and the provision is specific to the application. Okay, so what we get, it was a prototype with simple SAML PHP. We get support for front and back channel, as I told you before. We have a demo, I'm not going to show you because of the time. And we have a repository in GitHub because all this is open source. And I invite you to get and clone the repo and test it yourself. The next step would be to support SCIM. It's only change the initial request. All the other steps are the same. Okay. I did it.
Thank you, Lorenzo. This is not working either. Yes, it is. Maybe it is. Maybe it doesn't matter. Okay. 5.
5, am I 5?
You're
I'm missing it.
You're not here. Oh, you have the web.
Should be here somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, here. This one.
Where? No. Hold on. Here.
Too tall for the microphone.
Is this on?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm here to tell you about the Unhosted project. The Unhosted project is a hobby project that I started to fight the monopolies, the bad big companies that ruin our web and try to make it proprietary. It's about freedom from the web's monopolies. I got a lot of slides, so I'll go fast. Tonight we go drinking, but before that and after these lightning talks, there's a session here, the last session of today, about the unhosted architecture and how we use it in the Netherlands and how you can use it in your country. So that's here after the lightning talks, but before the drinks. So this project is about loving the web. We all love the internet. And that's maybe how software evolution came about, where software has slowly moved from desktop software, where you have applications and data like documents and photos on your hard disks and different applications on your computer, to a web architecture where you go to websites to do these things. So obviously the bad thing about how software on the web works now is that when you go to Flickr, then your photos are inside there. And maybe there's an export button, but you cannot use your files in one place and then use different applications with your own files. The data is inside the applications, and obviously no software engineer would have designed it that way, just evolved that way, because the people who pushed software on the web were people who have an interest in having your data and spying on it and having you sign agreements so that they can sell it forward to other bad people. So this is the way you use the internet. You use different devices, but your data is all in these applications. But we propose per user remote storage. It's actually very simple. It's the way the web should have worked all the time. So how that works is, instead of having the data in the applications, it's in one place where you control. So when you visit a website, the web is loaded into your browser, and the data comes from your own storage also into the browser. We can now do that with cross-origin headers. The web technology, we'll talk more about this in the session, the web technology can now afford us to get the application from one place and the data from another place with cross-origin AJAX calls. So that's how it should work. Applications should be made in JavaScript so that they can run in the browser. The HTML5 stack is getting very powerful. JavaScript is getting a lot faster, basically through a lot of the V8 engine has helped a lot. And we can now, JavaScript is now the Java that never was. It's the cross-platform platform that a lot of programmers speak and a lot of devices have it installed. Then with remote storage, which is a very simple specification that just, we'll go into that in the next session as well. But it's basically based on, I'll just mention it shortly, WebFinger, OAuth, cross-origin AJAX calls, and a very simple HTTP REST storage where you can just store something and get it back. Very simple thing, but it helps to keep your data in one place where you control it. So the way this works, on the application you have a login box where you just put in your user address, which has helped to discover where your storage is. So you visit a website and you type in your username, And then normally what they would create an account for you, they'd register you on that website, and they make you check a box for the SLA, which you don't read, or the terms of service. And they start collecting your data and selling it to their advertisers. But here you put in your user address and connect to your storage, which is at the domain which has your user address. So if your university supports this, then as a student or as a researcher, then your data will be stored at a server that your university has control over. Yeah, to show this again, with the browser, you open up one of the apps, you see the login box at the top, so you put in your username. That way, the JavaScript in the browser discovers where it should connect to with AJAX to get the data from. It gets it into the browser, and then that's where your data stays when it's at rest. When you're logged out, so the application comes from one place, the data comes from another place, they play together in the browser, but when you're logged out, it's gone. The data doesn't go into the application servers. So we're a team of just hackers who just play on this as for fun. But the Dutch government is now, SurfNet specifically is putting their weight behind this to make this a reality. So all this you'll see later in the Birds of a Feather session. Thank you.
So I'm Peter from TERENA. So basically, I'd like to talk about the data that is mine and the data that you think is yours, but I'm not sure about that. So basically, my data, my private data grows exponentially if you take a look at the devices that I had in the past 10 years. The good news is that there are a number of public cloud providers out there where I can use some storage space for free. So, and basically those amounts of gigabytes that are available for free is also exponentially growing. And if you check the statistics, the 96% of the Dropbox users last year were using the free account, and I'm one of those. But obviously, if you use public storage cloud service, you have some headaches. How can I access my accounts? What kind of platforms, devices I can use? What about the cost if you stick to one provider? How can I share my files? And obviously the privacy question is very important. This is the statement from the Google Drive terms of service, which basically says if you upload the files to Google, you give them a worldwide license to use, host, store, reproduce, modify, create, communicate, publish, publicly perform, publicly display, and distribute your data. And obviously they will do that with a limited purpose for operating and promoting their services, whatever that means. So this is you and me with our common headaches, and then one might have the idea to solve this, actually implementing a trusted cloud broker that brokers all those public or private cloud services for you. And the idea is basically that you have your data, which is encrypted, and you can store the encrypted data in the public cloud. But you store the data which matters, basically the metadata, which could be the file names, the file size, date of creation, but also the text that you are adding to your data, and the encryption keys, so you can store that part of the data at a trusted part in a metadata store, separate from your actual data. So the good news is that TERENA has implemented this little thingy for you. We call it TERENA Trusted Cloud Drive Pilot. This is only a pilot at the moment. So basically we have this trusted cloud broker, which is federated. So all the federations are hooked up with that, which does the encryption. It keeps the metadata and the storage data separate. And the whole architecture is pluggable. So basically you can bring your own storage backend if you like. And you can hook up with this little broker. So the other good news is that we are open up a public phase of this pilot for the next coming 9 months until March, April 2013. And we invite all of you to participate in this little pilot. How you can participate, there are several ways to participate. The easiest way probably is that you can bring your federated test users and test this thing out if you want. If you are a storage techie people, then you can try and attach your own storage backend to this broker. It needs some coding work, but should work. If you are an application designer, you can recommend us some new features, functions that we'd like to see in the future. And also you can develop new frontends to this. At the moment we have a web interface and also web dev interface, so you can mount this thingy for you as a drive. And the fourth thing is, if you don't trust anyone, then you can take the code and do it yourself. It's completely open source, so you can implement the same thing within your organization if you want. So how about our policy? As I said, this is only a pilot. This is not a service yet. And this pilot is about to figure out how we can deliver the service to you, what kind of service scenarios can be implemented. But technically speaking, yes, we have to copy your data because we were going to store that in separate locations. Yes, we have to modify your data because we're going to do the encryption and change the encryption keys with some unique identifiers. Yes, we're going to publicly display your data if you put it in a share folder or a public folder and you want to share it with others. We have to do that, and obviously we're going to do that in order to deliver the service to you. So basically our policy will be pretty much the same as the other cloud providers' policy. So it is not about the policy, it's about the trust. So if you have a trusted body that can hold all these sensitive data for you, then you can easily put the rest of the data to a public cloud. And again, the code is open source. My very last slide, we're going to have two demonstrations to show the current features of this thingy for you. The one is on Tuesday in the lunch break. And if you came here for the good food, then there is another opportunity on Wednesday in the afternoon coffee break, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how this works with separate platforms. You're very welcome. Minutes for another performance.
Dance?
No, I can't.
So that was my colleague Peter Zegedy.
No, I'm fine with that.
And now we have Sat. He's a New Zealander, be kind.
Kia ora to everyone, greetings from New Zealand. It's a long way from where I come from. Tuakiri, by the way, is the New Zealand Federation. The name being chosen, it's been branded as Tuakiri. Tuakiri is a Maori word, it actually means identity, also known as the New Zealand Access Federation. We have a production Access Federation service in New Zealand. Thanks to our partners in building the service, the Switch and the Australian Access Federation. We're using the same codes as the Switch and the Australian Access Federation. There's been some further work done by the Australian Access Federation and Tuakiri. That is our Federation Register Code. The sponsor for our project itself has been the Ministry of Science and Innovation, which has funded the project throughout. The project is actually coming to an end June this year, and the business plan is already in place to actually transform or transit the service from a project to a service itself. The project partners have been the University of Auckland, Lane Care Research, it's a Crown Research Institute, and the University of Canterbury. Tuakiri actually has been set up in New Zealand as an entity. It actually has got its own constitution, its rules, its policy itself. It has got executive committee, and it has actually set up a entity which is a not-for-profit. We have actually developed a service statement which actually we communicate to our members. The members itself in the initial state are the 8 universities and the 8 Crown Research Institutes. We found that using a service statement actually made it very easy for us to communicate the message and for institutions to understand what this is all about. What you see up here is on your right is the Crown Research Institutes in New Zealand. There are 8 of them, and on your left there is the 8 universities in New Zealand. These are the 16 institutions that are members of Tuakiri at the moment. The projections are that we will take the service into the polytech sector, where we have 20 polytechs and 3 other cultural institutes. We have a clearly defined business plan to grow the service, very much about establishing the service and taking the service out to the community. We have now actually launched a production subscription service. It's an annual subscription service. The objective here is to attain self-sustainability and support the service through the revenue streams we have. We have got some key focus items to look forward to, and we're according to the business plan, it's pretty much save the community, which is the higher education sector and research, grow the membership beyond what we have today, enable the services as more services we could, and interfederation or co-federation is something we keenly look forward to doing with either EduGain or IAF as we trek along those paths and continue the engagement with the wider sector. I've got a message from here from there's a video in here.
Supposed to be a video here?
Yeah, there's a video in there. Okay. That's Nick Jones, he's the director for...
It's a QuickTime.
Is it play?
No. It's in QuickTime, and QuickTime is not on this computer.
Okay. Right. You'll have to skip that. So pretty much the message there is from the New Zealand science community. New Zealand is actually embarked onto a program of work to develop and provide a service to the science sector. So that's the New Zealand e-science infrastructure. Tuakiri will centrally connect all the users getting onto the e-science infrastructure in New Zealand. That's about it. Thank you.
Apologies for the QuickTime gaffe, Sat. It's not that you're a New Zealander, it's that we didn't test it beforehand. Who do we have now? Hey, we're coming up on the halfway point of our presentation. We have Rajalisa now. And you're doing Prezi?
Yeah.
Yes. Would you like to...
Do you pronounce my name? Yet. Do you pronounce my name?
Rajalisa.
Okay,
Yeah?
it's
Yes?
very good.
I got it right?
Yes.
We've still got some time. We're burning into Sat's talk.
Yeah.
Is this the Prezi? It does not work. You get oh. Ah. Very good. Take it away.
Good afternoon. My name is Raija-Liisa Laakkonen, and I come from Finland. I am Director of Education, and one of my responsibility areas is virtual studies. That's why I am speaking about digital portfolios. I'm using Prezi animation because I like it very much. You all know that the portfolio is quite long have been models and photographers using, because they have a map with them and they have their pictures and articles and so on. But these are not digital. If we are talking about universities, teachers and researchers, we can say that the portfolio can be a collection of materials or a collection of evidence. A collection of evidence describing the development of knowledge, skills and attitudes. Nowadays we have 4 types of portfolios. A file, which is the oldest one, an electronic portfolio like CD-ROM, videotape, audio tape, so on. But now it is the newest one is digital portfolio, because storing, updating and sharing and editing is so easy, and it is easy to send it by email. And with students we usually use working portfolios because it is a process in the works. Students should report, reflection and self-assessment their own work. We can say that a portfolio shows qualification. It supports learning process, self-assessment and lifelong learning. And it is it demonstrates one's competence. Why we should use portfolios? It is easy if we should assess competencies when employing teachers and researchers. And nowadays we always have development discussions in all organizations. And it is easy to use a digital portfolio in development discussions. And when we should reconsidering job description, it is easy to watch what kind of materials we have in digital portfolios. The aim is to document workers' expertise, strengths, and insights of one's own development. We can say that the applicant represents and assists their skills and merits. And if we use digital portfolio, it is easy to illustrate that with compact examples and images and text, because these make it more personalized. Now I have 2 examples from my own digital portfolios. I have put pictures to my paper and links, as you see. Now it takes too long time to open this link, but my presentation slides are here. And then I can put videos to these portfolios. I have made a new pedagogical program, and I have this presentation on YouTube. It is on our websites because our staff members can watch it at what time they want. This was my presentation, and this was Prezi and digital portfolio. Thank you.
So now an expatriate Australian, Scott Ray, based in Utah now, has part 1 of 2 presentations on TLS certificates.
G'day everybody. So I'm actually going to be given a report on some research that is ongoing at the moment. There's a research paper that will be published here shortly, and you'll be able to get all the gruesome details out of that. So this is going to be a very quick overview of what's going on at the moment. One of the issues that has been out there right now, or seen as an issue, is there are a number of certification authorities that are trusted by default in browsers and operating systems that are the source of trust for a lot of transactions that occur, especially on the internet. Last year, a bunch of those CAs appeared in the news for all the wrong reasons. And this caused a lot of folks to run around and say, you know, the sky is falling and we've got to overhaul the whole system. We need a different mechanism of trust. The main method of attack was using a man-in-the-middle attack, and instead of going against an individual website, folks figured out it's much more profitable if you could attack a CA. And now, of course, the main issue that was identified is with the number of CAs that are trusted in a browser. There may be up to several hundred that are trusted in your browser of choice or your operating system of choice. And even though they are all trusted the same, they don't necessarily all operate the same. And all you have to do is compromise the one with the weakest link. It's that same old adage that I heard yesterday in refeds. If you're out on the tundra and you come across an aggressive grizzly, not a grizzly on the tundra, it'd be a polar bear, wouldn't it? So if you came across a polar bear, how fast do you need to run? Only faster than your companion. And the same deal applies to the CAs. You just got to find the weakest link. So, as a result of saying, look, we've got some issues here, There were a number of proposals that were put forward saying, we can solve this issue, we don't need the CAs anymore, or perhaps we build on the CAs because there's a combination of these in here. There were 8 different proposals that were assessed in this research. They're listed up there: perspectives, convergence, MECI, DANE, public key pinning, sovereign key, CA records in DNSSEC, and certificate transparency. Basically, the researchers defined a metric for evaluating each of these against a certain set of categories and just give them a rating of 1 to 10. Eventually came up with a metric that applied to all of them. That was a difficult thing to do, but came up with something they believe that works. And this is the set of categories that they came up with. Number 1, you can't pin your hopes on something that will never get off the ground, so there had to be a defined business case. And resources need to be available to operate the proposals. Another aspect that was considered was that if you were going to change things, you had to consider what impact that was going to have. Are the web clients going to have to change? Are web hosts going to have to change? Are relying parties going to have to change the way that they operate? The system obviously has to scale. We did not want to introduce any additional latency into the existing process. Clients should be able to identify these attacks that happened last year, so when an attack was happened, be able to identify when that was happening and respond to that. They must be able to revoke whatever became your mechanism of trust and be able to manage that. The default implementation, keeping in mind that maybe the folks in this room are power users, but the average person out there is just going to accept the defaults, and so the defaults out of the package had to work. They had to not introduce a single point of failure into the system and be susceptible to DOS attacks. They had to solve the man-in-the-middle attack, or at least take a good whack at it. And privacy must be protected. So these were the considerations in the research. Each of the categories were ranked, and in the paper you'll see the reasons for the scores that they got. And this is how they came out, which was rather surprising to the researchers. The conclusions are there are a bunch there that are not yet ready for prime time, but there are perhaps at least 1 or 2 that might be worth considering further in their current form. The industry has not sat on its haunches this whole time. CAB Forum has published a mantra for addressing this as well. They set out 4 key initiatives that they're focusing on. These 4 key initiatives were rated against the existing system. This was seen as perhaps a little bit prejudiced, so we take out the numbers for changes, and you see that you end up with some scores that are relatively close. The conclusions are nothing's really ready for prime time right now. There's still research that needs to go on, and all of these systems should be reevaluated as they mature a little bit further. Thank you.
It's great to see being in Utah hasn't eroded your accent any. I can't really be mocking Scott too much. I believe that my accent is quite thick, but I think it's perfect. Now we have another Commonwealth Dominion being represented. This is Chris Phillips from Canary in Canada. We're more than halfway through the lightning talk, so if you were sitting in another lecture theatre, either of the other 3 for the past hour, you would have potentially had 2 boring presentations that you would have had to sit through and not as much useful content. And so now you have a wealth of other people that you can collaborate with when this session's over. Let's thank Chris.
Wow, that light's bright. I hope you can hear me. Thank you. My name is Chris Phillips. I'm with Canary. I'm the technical architect for the Canadian Access Federation. And what I'm going to do is talk about simple cloud identity management. On the website for the material, there's about 18 slide deck. If I did it slide by slide, it'd only be 15 seconds per slide, which I'm not going to do. So I'm going to skip across the top, simple cloud identity management. the genesis for this is in the private sector. And with Canary, I was fortunate enough to come across it and dealing with the identity management synchronization that Lorenzo did a great job earlier talking about. And it's targeted at overtaking SPML, because SPML was, at the time, was a great idea, but that was about 10 years ago. And now that something is lighter weight to overcome that, because there's a lot of enterprise class things you need to have in place. But when you have nimble applications like you do today, you don't want to have the enterprise carrier. You just need the U-boat. Where does it play? In this picture here, really it's about the connectors to the resources on the edge. And as a federation operator, we're really interested with those from a single sign-on perspective and applications. The SCIM connector can connect out to other applications, and really it's about the protocol there. The design intent, basically fast and cheap to get the users out into the environment. And coming from a federation operator, you'd think that why are we talking about provisioning when we really want single sign-on? Well, when we talk about the provisioning side of things, there's a lot of paradox of choice out there. And with single sign-on, we can get people to sign in, but what about their account record? And as Lorenzo pointed out earlier about the just-in-time provisioning versus the just-in-case provisioning, this is about the just-in-case provisioning part. And as we have today, a lot of people in the audience probably have a bespoke configuration, a custom-built one. And so as you build these things out, you're going to have a very custom environment. So we see it as part of a fourth pillar on the sort of the federated experience of dealing with an application out there, the domestication of the application. We have single sign-on, federation, we have policies and practices, and schema is a really important point here. And again, I'm just going to skip across some of these slides just to stay on track here. So it's another tool in the tool belt. We want to be able to provide a good home for the schema and practices. Otherwise, everything is a custom build. And there's other places that we can talk about things with identity management. And there's not many other places to deal with schema, and SCIM provides that foil for that. I'm going to skip on some of the terminology and throw what the SCIM looks like. Service provider, unfortunately, yes, service provider is the opposite term than we're accustomed to in the federation side of things. And the consumer is more like the application. And so we have REST API in between. The schema started from portable contracts, and some people may be asking themselves, why is this not INET.org? Well, there's a lot to be dealt with multi-valued attributes and having a rich data model or a way to encapsulate that. So take a look at the portable contracts and see how you can hammer some of your custom model into there. EduPerson is also a thing that can be encapsulated within the SCIM environment too. There is mapping going on between the INET.org person and the AD side of things, and especially with the SAML. In the SAML, there's a trust environment that we can leverage. So the just-in-time or just-in-case provisioning that Lorenzo had talked about, and again, thank you for that extra stuff at the beginning to really cement some of the places where this can be applied to. There's another talk that Tom Zeller from Internet2 provided that has a really good, really lightweight axes about how things are going and how they compare and contrast against each other, and I recommend you take a look at it. It's licensed, Open Web Foundation, so it's available today. It's in a 1.0 state. It's gone to the IETF. It's just finished its working group charter, and now it's at the IESG waiting to continue to the next stage. If you're looking for timelines, basically the 1.0 you have about a year to really leverage it. It's already been out for about half a year. And about in 2013, summer 2013 will be a place to have some things. And in the last few dying seconds, I'll work in, it's not all about sunshine, lollipops, and unicorns. There's some places that is it really simple, and there's some other topics that are available. So, and I'll leave the takeaways right there. Thank you.
I've stolen your phone. Is this your phone?
That's my phone.
I thought it was Scott's phone. I stole something. No, I didn't make a call. I'm pretty sure that Chris's shout out about unicorns was just to get Nicole Harris to retweet him. But we'll find out real soon now. Here we go. And some of the other speakers have already questioned whether this always does 5 minutes, and it really is always 5 minutes. There's not some special amount of time for other people.
It's stressful.
It's stressful. Yeah. We can hide it if you want.
I don't have a look. So, hello, I'm Nectaria Berikou. It's a great pleasure for me being here with you today. Why I'm here? I want to present you our platform, the European Infrastructures Observatory, and invite you to reflect to its formation before it becomes available to the public at large next month. So, what is the European Infrastructure Observatory? It's a facility that can be of great interest and value to the networking community and to the stakeholders overall as a comprehensive monitoring and dissemination framework that will allow you to keep a track of the development and prospects in the area of infrastructures for Europe and beyond, including especially a frame of reference for networking, as well as for grids, supercomputers. But why do we need such a facility? First of all, infrastructure stakeholders and providers need a tool, a service for prospective and retrospective evaluation. And they need a tool for reporting the diversity and scope of their resources and their usage to funders and decision makers at national and pan-European levels. The issue of benchmarking has also been raised high in the European policy agenda in several recent occasions, as vital for assessing the impact of electronic infrastructures in Europe and towards other global regions of interest. So, which was our vision? Our vision was to formate an observatory and single entry point, a one-stop shop data warehouse that geographically address mainly EU member states, but is capable to be expandable for global coverage. We represent infrastructure-related benchmarks for networking grids and supercomputers, while being expandable for emerging infrastructures, through intuitive, interactive, and user-friendly visualization interface and use case scenarios. What is the current status? The observatory has already reached a mature functional state. It features a core set of 45 benchmarking indicators that are the baseline for monitoring development progress, usage, impact, and investments. It provides access to more than 10,000 individual figures. It offers several visualization tools that are all of them based on best practices in representation and visualization techniques. And we have consolidated more than 18 months of stakeholders' feedback and consensus, both on the list of the indicators and the functionality of the tools. It is imperative that the observatory is accepted and well received by the community and the infrastructures, but actually by you, because it is you that who will define its usage and the observatory sustainability in the future. So sufficient liaison took place with key infrastructure stakeholders and individual experts, along with the lines of engaging with an active advisory board and with consulting with key infrastructure projects such as and policy bodies such as TERENA, EGI, Inspire, EIRG, fellow projects and initiatives, and of course with key European infrastructure stakeholders. Here you can have a look at the stakeholders' endorsements. We have their support during the whole duration of the project. Now you have a look at the main jump-off page that presents the visualization tools. Unfortunately, I don't have time to have a live tour right now. Here are the 7 tools. You have the ability to visualize indicators on a geographical map, as well as graphs, bar, line, trend charts, scatter plots, allowing you to examine interrelations between indicators. You can make a selection both of countries and of indicators, and observe how the values are changing over time, which country has progressed and which is lagging behind. We also have tree maps. A tree map is a non-geographical spatial map, organization mappings, communities mappings. Here you can have a look at the key performance indicators. So, you are more than welcome to visit me just outside of the main hall to make demonstrations of the services, and please take a tour. This is the playground area. You need a login and a password. This is on the screen. We really need your input and your recommendations for improvement and for future activities. Thank you very much.
Display accept, right? Why? Full screen mode, yeah. Very good. So, hello to everyone on the stream, especially to one of the experts that are listed in the previous presentation. And remember, if you're in the audience watching this, you can watch some of the other less exciting presentations in parallel tracks later in your hotel room after the opening reception tonight. Buses will be leaving the venue at 7:30, so if you're situated in town, remember you need to get back here in order to get the bus to the opening reception in time. Otherwise, you'll sort of mull around an empty cinema at night. But now we have Yanni talking about PageKite.
Okay, so let's not install any updates. Cancel. Hope it doesn't come back. So yes, I'm here to talk about PageKite, which is an open source project that I've been working on for the last couple of years. Briefly about the motivation. I think the internet is awesome, and I miss the good old days when it was truly decentralized and peer-to-peer, where people could run a server on any node, and any node could talk to any other node. I also really like the web, but I don't think it's quite as nice. It's, distributed a bit, but there's a lot of centralization. And it has a client-server architecture, which I think is sort of fundamentally inferior to a peer-to-peer architecture. And I believe this has led to certain kinds of breakage or problems. And some of it's waste. We just waste a lot of time doing things like uploading content, copying things around, keeping things in sync. There's privacy issues, which other people have mentioned here earlier today. And sort of the culmination of all of these things is these web silos where everybody is using an individual website to talk to their friends, things like Facebook. I consider them to be a problem, even though they do provide an awesome service. So what PageKite is trying to do is let you make it easy for you to run a publicly accessible web server on any device. So you can have a picture like this, where everyone's talking to everyone else. The way this is done, because this is a room full of technical people, I can say it's reverse proxies and tunnels and dynamic DNS, and probably half the people in here will be able to go out and put something together. It does more or less the same thing as PageKite. But the reason I started doing this is I sort of took a step back and was thinking about why is the web not peer-to-peer? And how does the web behave as a network? And on the web, the sort of fundamental address is a domain name. It's not an IP address. We use DNS to resolve domain names to IP addresses. But if you look at the fact that the names are what matters, you can start thinking about the web as an overlay network, where you say, I would like to connect to this name. The network somehow makes that happen, and you have a conversation in HTTP or HTTPS. So what PageKite does, it creates this network. It allows you to create a server somewhere that reaches out to the overlay network and says, this is my name, send me all of my traffic. So this works today, and it has benefits. It means you suddenly have a peer-to-peer architecture for the web, because a web server can run anywhere. It can run behind NAT, you can run it on a virtual machine, or you can run it on a mobile device that's changing networks over and over again. It has some problems as well. If you change networks, then you'll lose your connection to the PageKite cloud for a little while. But as soon as you have internet connectivity again, the connection can be reestablished. And honestly, if you're moving from network to network, it's very hard to avoid this problem. Another main benefit of this approach is that it's backwards compatible. You can use all of the existing browsers, all of the existing servers. We can start thinking about peer-to-peer networking without throwing away all of the progress that has been made and is being made with HTML5 and Speedy and WebSockets, and all that stuff is great. It has some real-world applications. I'm not able to do a demo for you, but the demo would have fit in the slide, in the talk. It only takes about 1 minute to get up and running. And it's mostly, so far, proven useful for people who are developing websites themselves. So if you have a new web server or a new web app in development on your laptop, you're inevitably going to reach the point where you want to show it to somebody. And sending people localhost links doesn't work, but if your local server suddenly has a public name and is reachable, you can do that, and you can skip the deployment step of copying everything to some remote server. It has applications to privacy. If you want to take unhosted and have your remote storage on your device, PageKite makes that really easy, so you can bring it home. Similar, there was the talk about the broker. That's the typical kind of thing I would want to run myself. There are many applications like this. Generally, you can suddenly start treating the web as a way to have a private conversation instead of assuming that everything you put on a web is living on somebody else's server. And thirdly, there's the Internet of Things. People build embedded devices that need to be monitored, they need to be administered remotely, and today that's hard because of NAT and IP address scarcity and all those things. Switching to web-based interfaces or proxying things over the web allows you to do remote administration of devices that don't have an IP address. So you're welcome to try it. It's open source. The source code lives on GitHub, and pagekite.org has a sort of brief overview of the code and the related projects. And the other half of this project is a commercial enterprise at pagekite.net, which is trying to pay me a salary by running services, running infrastructure and providing services. But it's all open source, so I invite you to try it. And I finished way ahead of time. Thank you.
Some of the way ahead of time was because I had to climb up on the stage partway through the presentation. I forgot to set the timer, so apologies to Guido Arben. In fact, the archived version of these streams are not the only way to see these presentations. There's actually a media streaming competition going on that's capturing various parts of these recordings and will be making them available in an array of different formats from different groups. So when you see the people on a bench at the back, when you exit this auditorium, they're actually conducting this, trial as we speak, and that's not for me. And yeah, the results of that will be available, during the week of the contest. Keep looking at the website or hang around the TERENA booth for more information.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, in these 5 minutes, I will try to explain what is the unified communication testbed that we are deploying in ANEIA Científica. First of all, let me say that SESCA, the company where I work, is a public consortium in Catalonia, in the northeast part of Spain, and it's formed by the local government, 9 Catalan universities, and 2 institutions related to research. And the aim of SESCA is to foster the collaboration among the universities and also to reduce the costs, sharing as many infrastructures as possible. So one of the examples of a shared infrastructure is ANEIA Científica. ANEIA Científica is the research and education network in Catalonia. It's connected to the Spanish NREN Rediris, and it connects 90 institutions related to research. And another example of collaboration is the deployment that we have done on the top of ANEIA Científica. It's a testbed that connects 7 universities and SESCA to a unified communication system that has been developed by an 8th university called UPCnet, or Barcelona Tech. UPCnet is a university enterprise born from Barcelona Tech. And they are already using it. It's called eConnect. And the idea is to have a unique identifier. The email address is a unique identifier, mostly based on the SIP.edu project, the SIP.edu ID and architecture from Internet 2. And that's what they also call it, SIPcat.edu. There are several testbed telephones for each participant institution. Most of them have 5 telephones on their universities, and every participant, every user has the same telephone number and the same dialing scheme that he used to have before using the platform. They can use the same short numbering. Local calls remain inside the university. Normal calls are as usually done, but calls among the members of the platform of the testbed are done using the data network. Mobile devices like this one, like this smartphone, or like this silly clock that has no clock at all. I mean, I think something happened here. Well, the calls with mobile devices work as desktop phones using the data network. I can call from here as if I were in the office. The management of the platform is not centralized. Each university can manage its own users, but there's a single and neutral entity, the SESCA, to centralize all the incidents and coordinate the testbed. The aim is, again, to foster the collaboration and to reduce the cost. So there are 3 main ideas. One of them is the email address is the unique identifier. Another one, the web account for each user to manage their calls is very easy to use. And another one is that users can bring their corporate telephone number wherever they are. They can use the smartphones by using a standard SIP application like Bria or SIPDroid. And this will allow to make and receive calls. I can receive calls here as if I were in my office. It works with these telephones, with iPad or Android. It doesn't work with BlackBerry yet. So we have institutions that have analog PBXs and digital PBXs. On the left side, you have analog PBXs. On the right side, digital PBX, like a call manager. For this, on the top, you have the university with the telephones of the testbed. And the communication is done via a gateway that we have between the 2 walls. And when they have a call manager, we have a SIP trunk to the hardware of the platform. The network is private and dedicated to avoid security holes, and the solution is based on free software with Asterisk, Amelio, Apache, Nagios, and so. This is an example of the web for the administrator, where you can see that the user is registered. It has 2 telephone registers. One of them is the telephone on his desktop. The other one is his mobile phone. He can also register a web telephone that is inside the platform. Here you see the web client, the SIP web client. And this is the portal that provides access to all the features and services, including this mobile web communicator. You can see your contacts, your telephone calls received and done. You can also receive your voice messages to the email address and hear them from a web file. And you have a feature called Click to Call that automatically detects the telephone numbers in web pages, and you only need to click on the telephone number. Your registered telephone will ring you, and it will automatically ring the other side. And this is what we are doing now, and we will finish this deployment in July. Thank you. Thanks for your attention.
I think that there's a nautical term about when you go sailing, you either take 1 clock or 3. Because if you've got 2 and they're not in sync, you don't know which one is right and which one is wrong. Or you could tamper with the only clock that I have to make your talk longer. But thank you for keeping very well to time, I believe, Maria. Next up, we have Christian Schmidt from PowerFolder. And I won't tell you what he's talking about, because in 5 minutes you'll know.
Sure. All right, can everybody hear me? All right. I'm Chris from PowerFolder, and I'm here to talk about PowerFolder and the collaboration with Janet that we've agreed on recently and went public today. A brief summary of what we're doing. Most of you will not be familiar with PowerFolder. We are a small company from Germany that is rapidly growing right now, and we have tried to reduce our public relations and are just now starting to be more publicly visible So I will just give you a quick introduction of PowerFolder, then go to the showcase of our current deployment in Luxembourg, and detail the cooperation with Janet on Project Moonshot. So what are we doing in the areas that are interesting to the educational community? First of all, we're providing a private cloud service that offers synchronization, collaboration, backup versioning, web access, mobile access. As some of our customers previously asked, so are you doing something like a Dropbox that we can have in our own facilities, on our own data, and have 100% control of our data? And the answer would be yes, and a lot more. So this is also the next point. We are really aiming at giving a solution that gives 100% control over the data to you and integrate our solution 100% into your existing infrastructure. So what we do is we provide something like LDAP access, federated radio support, our own internal database, and various APIs to ensure that you can carry over things such as quota of users, existing user databases into your PowerFolder deployment. For example, you can even have a authentication chain that you have a federated radius user. If it doesn't exist, it will look at the LDAP, and if that doesn't exist, it could still use the powerful internal database. We believe that's a very powerful and simple way to achieve this technology and this use case. And you might ask yourself, because you might have not heard about PowerFolder, is that something that's just a theory or is it really working? And yes, it is working. In the education space, this might be the most interesting case right now. The country of Luxembourg has decided in summer of 2011 that they're looking for a solution for their portal called My School, and it's kind of a classroom file space, common file space, and they've decided to go forward with us. And in the past few months, they have rigorously evaluated our software, and we have worked hard at making sure that all the different relationships between students, staff, entities are actually replicated in the different folders. So you will have a classroom folder where the students have read access, but only the teachers have write access, and all these different aspects that are important to such a collaboration on such a scale. As you can see there are also some numbers to it. It's not an active deployment as we speak. I'm not 100% sure when they will deploy it. I only know that the testing has been 100% completed, I think 2 months ago, 1 or 2 months ago. And I believe most likely they will do the rollout in summer. This is the scale of the students, 45,000 students and 12,000 teachers. And the brand or the product that this will run under will be the myschool.lu. Okay. And yeah, since we don't have much time left, let's just go to the next point. Recently, about 6 weeks ago, we've entered talks with Janet because, as Brooke from TERENA pointed out to us, that they're doing Project Moonshot. That might be a very interesting extension to what we're already doing. And what Janet does with Moonshot is that they're trying to deliver a unified approach for securing access to any service or application. So within a few telcos and talks, we've kind of agreed on that both parties are interested in reaching something that would look like a Moonshot technology integrated into PowerFolder will enable a federated private cloud file space with a federated identity provider. And that's actually what we're working on. And if you want to see any of these things, just go over to the Géant booth, and there you will see a live demo of both Moonshot and PowerFolder. That's it. Oh, and one more thing, if you want to have more detailed information, we have these brochures laying around at the Géant booth. Thank you.
Because of the adage that you can't keep a good thing down.
Am I good?
It depends whether you've actually eaten at the sort of tapas bar in town, because you know that if you can't keep it down, it's not because it's good. We've got Scott Ray back again.
Yeah, all right, and to be fair, because you had to put up with me twice, I want to balance the scale up a little bit. So since DigiCert is a sponsor of the conference, I have 3 DigiCert hats here, which I will give away to the first 3 people who come up to me after this session today and can give me a proper Australian g'day, not like SAT, has to be Australian, no New Zealand, and ask me about one of these research projects. So in keeping in mind with the previous presentation, again, there's some additional research that is going on. I spoke about one aspect that was being carried out. Again, this is also being led by Dartmouth and New York University. And again, it is focusing on those CAs. One of the things that came out of the compromises, it was found that revocation processes for internet CAs are terribly lacking. And in particular, OCSP was found to be quite deficient. And there really is not a very good plan or implementation, at least, of managing trust anchors in a dynamic way that users could actually control. The browsers really have control of that, and they didn't necessarily respond as quickly as folks wanted. CAB Forum is a forum of the internet browsers and those CAs that are trusted in operating systems and browsers. And again, here's those same four principles that they're working on as a result of these attacks. You'll notice that one of those, the second one there, is to find ways to improve revocation mechanisms in the existing infrastructure. And so they have formed a working group to take a look at that. The participants come from the Internet CA browser group. Browsers, the CAs, research and EDU are participating. IETF and the major aligned parties are all participating in the working group. They're having monthly conference calls. The things that they are looking at is data availability and in different formats, access to revocation services without latency, taking into account the high maintenance costs that typically come into play for high available services, and how they can really manage this set of trust anchor routes, perhaps independent of browsers or in conjunction with browsers. Some of the initial proposals that have been looked at in timeframe reference in terms of what can be addressed short term, what would take a midterm to implementation, and what's a little bit further out. Keeping in mind that this is not starting points for each of these initial proposals. Each of these proposals are, in theory, being worked on right now as we speak. This is when we would expect to see them reaching their fruition if we worked on them today. And so some of the things that were looked at short term is lightweight OCSP. We have RSC 5019 that defines some things in that, yet there were some deficiencies there. Actually, I'm going to go through these individually if I have time. So the first thing that the working group looked at is what are the best practices that the internet CAs are undergoing, or what would be best practices to implement. Having multiple sources of revocation status data, whether that be CRL or OCSP and multiple versions of that. Pre-computing responses for OCSP is a best practice, and publishing them every few hours or a day at most. Having geographically dispersed points that folks can pull from, so as long as the idea being you get the revocation status provision service as close as possible to the person who is trying to pull that data. And perhaps looking at different mechanisms for distributing that revocation data, whether that is over content distribution networks or taking advantage of OCSP stapling. Some of the issues that were pointed out, there is a major browser right now that still does post and does not do GET. If we can do GET, then CDNs become very easy to support. There are different encoding that might come into play. That being the case, although the closer that we've looked at that seems a smaller and smaller issue. And then again, there are high costs of deploying OCSP services if you're going to physically host them. Therefore, the stapling and using the caching via CDNs is a better way to go. Some opportunities, let's try and get OCSPs kind of like CRLs, but just as small as possible, so that you don't actually have to do a request and you can just do a pull out of a CDN. So short-term approaches, promote best practices in, as I just went through, in the community to update 5019 with the pieces that it's missing, and then address implementation issues by actually working on server implementations to support these things. Mid-term approaches, we're working on an RFC, and long-term approaches, really just discussions at this point. That's it.
Remember to find Scott to get a hat. Thank you for staying this long. Remember, you can look at the stream and you can look at people's slides at the website. You can catch other presentations that you might have missed. There is a BOF in this room, so if you're interested in the work of the unhosted guys, stay in this room or go out and see if there's any coffee still left over, or get a drink and be back in here in half an hour. And remember, in 2 hours' time, give or take, yeah? So we're only 5 minutes over. Not too bad. So in 2 hours' time, the buses will depart, or at least the first bus departs in 2 hours' time from outside this venue if you're going to the opening reception. You're all invited to the opening reception, if there was any confusion. You've got the rest of the week at TNC. I hope you found the presenters interesting. Track them down if you want to collaborate more or get some more information out of their presentations. Their details are online, they're around the place. Check Twitter or your favourite social networking site. And yeah, thank you.